Good morning. Oh, excuse me. Good afternoon and good evening. Welcome to Political Cipher with Q. Today we're going to do part two of with recreational and medical cannabis. And we're going to have a productive discussion. I would like to get everything out of the way by thanking Danny Glover for the opportunity to make this show possible through Black USA News and to all our wonderful sponsors. So before we start, we're going to start off by introductions, and we're going to have some other people pop in as we go along. And who will be first?
Bruce Branch here, Maryland Business Clergy Partnership, African American Cannabis Association, a community activist.
And I'm
Okay.
Joe Gaskins, chairman of the African American Cannabis Association.
All right. So we will have other people joining us as well. All right. So we're going to start off with the first question of the day. All right. The first question is on last Thursday, President Biden announced a historical step with his intent to pardon all simple marijuana possessions offenses. What will this mean to the African American community?
I think it just merely means that people who have been unjustly incarcerated for various amounts of times um, will finally get their due justice and that they will be released from prison. That's the way I see it. No more, no less. It's a political move on the eve of 2 years before a presidential election, and it still stops way short of what we need in terms of financial reparations for the pain that has been caused to our community.
Okay. All
I
right, Mr.
think,
Gaskins.
yeah, I think it's a very good move on his part. I haven't seen a president before who has moved to actually do that. So he should be commended for the fact that he's pushed it out there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, whether he has the support of the Senate and also of the House becomes questionable. And again, uh, the election is going to determine he can whether it becomes a permanent move because uh, if it's a bill and it goes through Congress and if it's passed, then it's one thing. But if it's not a bill, then it can be changed by the next president. So if he's not successful in his run for presidency, it will not. It will just go away, and nothing will happen. But I will say this: is that some steps need to take place in order for the us to correct prior injustices.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we don't ever get anything, we don't begin the progress. So each step, although it's a baby step,
Mm-hmm.
it's a step in the right direction because nothing has been done before. And we still have African American males, females who are being stopped on the side of the highway, whose cars are being checked. Then they're taken in, and their records are being recorded, and it's holding them back from getting jobs, important jobs. They can't get on police departments as law enforcement individuals. They can't get federal government jobs. So it's a huge impact that this president can move along that journey to start to correct. And I agree with Bruce. There are a lot of things that got to go along with it, but you have to have the momentum. You got to be willing to step up as a leader of a free country and make certain moves and put them in place. I'm anxious to see how it works, and we need to put pressure on our elected officials, congressional, Senate, to support him in this effort.
Okay. Welcome, Miss Ellis. How are you today?
Oh, Russian and but I'm well.
Okay,
Give
so we're
myself.
talking about last Thursday, where President Biden announced a historical step with his intent to pardon all simple marijuana cases, possession offenses. What will that mean to African American community?
Well, that's big, and I'm listening to Joe, and I'm sure I miss Bruce having a lot to say, that he's contributed a lot of work towards trying to help individuals that are incarcerated or returning citizens. What that would mean for the African American and people of color, hopefully that it trickles down to the local level where we can begin to do expungement programs, that individuals that ordinarily have been locked out of positions, like Joe was just saying, would then qualify because those things would no longer be relevant or a burden to their records. So this is a major step in the right direction, mainly because, as you know, that we, especially here in Maryland, have the highest offense for any charges of marijuana. So this is going to be a major, major step in the right direction in helping to correct what has been wrong for so long.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask the question. So with this major step, would it be would it the next step be that he would alleviate the federal restrictions that are actually causing the states, particularly our state, to be off the hook as far as making laws, unjust laws about marijuana, who can get it, who can't. If he was to, if so, that if the federal government is seeing this marijuana as illegal, and the states are seeing it as legal, if he was to take that restriction off, would that be a benefit to African Americans, and why?
Well, it must, we have to push to get marijuana removed as a Class A um, drug at the federal level, primarily because most of these individuals, we live in a federal environment. This area is a federal, most people work for the federal government. The federal government is the largest employer in the DMV. So
Mm-hmm.
if you have marijuana or marijuana charge, you won't qualify. You're tested. So removing it at the state level is one thing, but the big step is to remove it at the federal level, so that we can then drill down to having real research done. Doctors can begin to talk about it from a medical perspective, and we can see the broader benefits of marijuana instead of just looking at it from a recreational lens. But the legal aspects will literally lift a burden in so many areas, from recreational to job, qualifying for employment, to being able to adequately do research so that we can then put prescriptions on medical, instead of just saying, okay, drink some tea, eat an edible, or smoke a little bit. We can't do proper diagnosis, and doctors cannot begin to have conversations about it. Then we're looking at banking. Banks, we're paying huge fees, and one of the barriers to entering the market, this industry, is because banks won't finance or cover us because they're federally regulated.
Mm-hmm.
So removing it at the federal level has a broader implications on the impacts of us as African Americans and people of color. That's where our push should be.
Okay.
Quanta,
And
let me add this.
okay.
Because it's a lengthy process and you got to get started on it uh, in order to to correct the prior discriminatory practices
Mm-hmm.
of that were targeted at lower level individuals who are small medical marijuana users, not the
Mm-hmm.
large growers who are bringing the product into the country and
Mm-hmm.
who get really no charges. But it's the small person who sits on the corner trying to make a living and selling this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and who are indicted and destroyed, careers destroyed. And when we use this, we look at this really not with the criticalness that we should. It because we're real. If you're not affected by it, then it's just uh, something that took place, um, and I go about my way. I worry about my bills. I don't worry about the other person, but to a person who's spent years in jail
Mm-hmm.
and who has a record and has to come out and get a job, they can't even get a
Mm-hmm.
job driving a dump truck.
Right.
Okay, I mean that's the seriousness of what's at place, and we somehow think that this is something minor. And you've got a multitude of African American kids, young kids, and older individuals whose
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
careers and lives were destroyed because of misclassification of drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, yes, it has to, as Lisa said, it has to be a situation where we now look at how do we go back and correct that, expunge records. But expunging records is only the beginning of a
that's true.
injustice that has gone on for the last 30, 40, 50 years, and other individuals have gotten wealthy on the product or paid their way out of violations where smaller individuals were never capable of actually doing this. So shortly thereafter, I want to say this that what came out that was critical from the state of Maryland's perspective. Wes Moore immediately came out and said this is one of the best decisions that he's heard out of this administration so far. And his intent was to change the scheduling of marijuana as a whole and stop the process of reviewing convictions once he becomes the next governor of the state of Maryland, if he becomes the next governor of the state of Maryland. And
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be at the top of his agenda. And he also made the statement that one of the things that he wanted to do was to start the process of correcting um, the injustice that were done to small minority businesses who were created unjustly in a process over the last 10 or more years in the state
Mm-hmm.
of Maryland, which we were left out as entrepreneurs of a process that's continuing to make money and leaving a multitude of African Americans out of that particular process as well.
Now, what's a problem? You had legislation that was introduced, I think, by Ivy, Delegate Ivy. I'm not sure which one introduced it last session, but it dealt with expungement and different acts of being able to enter the industry 3 years after, 2 years after. There's a period of time that has been introduced to these individuals that have paid their time, that has done time for something they shouldn't have, still having to pay, still having barriers once they're released to entering a market that now individuals that imprison them are benefiting from.
Mm-hmm.
I really have a major issue with that. I think as legislators, as activists, we must revisit that and say, wait a minute, this isn't totally fair. We're looking at prohibition all over again. You lock us up for making it, and then once it becomes legal, we're still paying. So when do we stop bleeding? Is my question.
Good question. All right. So here we are. Question number 2. Question number 4 is on the ballot: legalizing recreational cannabis in Maryland. What impact will this have on the African American community?
My thing is twofold because I think it has to be regulated in some minor way, even though it's legal, like alcohol is. I mean, you have people who abuse everything, and the abuse of marijuana can be very detrimental. I think
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean nobody else agrees with me to people who are not disciplined enough to keep it in its right perspective. And as a result of that, some people will still abuse it. But at the same time, it's a catch 22 because there's some people who make their living off selling marijuana, and including attorneys. So it's a catch 22, and it has to be a healthy balance. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Is there a healthy balance in anything? I mean, alcohol to me has caused more deaths, more fatalities, and injuries mentally, physically, destroyed families. I've never heard of marijuana destroying a family. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a drug that enters and exits your system more so than an opioid. Opioids, you go through withdrawals, you have an addictions, you're robbing people. Individuals, and it has been proven that smoke marijuana are not out there robbing you. They're not. It doesn't have the same euphoric feel that opioids and alcohol does. But all anything can be abused and anything can have a next level if if it's taken there. Putting restrictions in place, legalizing it for recreational is the same thing to me as alcohol when you're talking about regulations and guidance and laws that you can't drive and smoke, that, there's boundaries to everything. And we must keep that in mind that this is still a euphoric drug. So, yeah, regulations on anything that takes you outside of yourself. Every prescription has guidance or instructions as to how to take it, what you should do. You shouldn't drive, this and that. And the same thing will apply to marijuana. I think all in all, it's a safer drug, personally.
I will say this about this. It's not like all of a sudden we are releasing something that's new. I mean, come on. Marijuana use goes back to when I was in college. I mean, heck, I mean, and out of all the drugs that were introduced during the 70s, in the 80s, marijuana was the most, uh, the least negative impactful on individuals, and that was including alcohol as well. So it's not going to be like all of a sudden we pass this and let's adjust to a bunch of new individuals out there who's going to be. I don't want to. They're actually already smoking it already. All right,
This
let's be real. Let's not joking about this new group of people who are going to come out there and be smoking on the corner, stand on the corner. They're doing it. They're doing it in D.C. already.
California, Denver, everywhere.
Everywhere. The only difference is that right now, what he's proposing to do will now open this up so that certain states will not have their legislators impacting the lives of the least fortunate. Because in our
Yes.
society, we all know that if you've got money, you can do this. You're not going to get caught. If you're going to get caught, you're going to be released, even if it's a major drug bust. You're going to walk away. If you're wealthy, if you're wealthy and you know people, your charges are going to be minimized. But a small guy who happens to be driving down the highway and who has a joint or in his ashtray of his car or a smell in his car when a police officer pulls him over is going to be pulled over and his car is going to be searched. Any and everything. It's going to be, his whole life is going to change in a matter of seconds. And he's going to have to hire self attorney, him or her, hire themselves attorney. And now he's going to also be in court. And also, without having the money, he's going to have to go to the required facilities and pay fees to go through this thing about somebody put it together that, okay, let me go there and never stop you from smoking marijuana. It's going to change you. Come on. It's a process that we do, and certain people have been impacted for so particular long, and it's been accepted for so particular for a long period of time that we look at it and we say, okay, it's something that I just got to deal with. You should not have to deal
Exactly.
with this. This is something that as a citizen, everybody's doing it who wants to do it. The certain group of people are paying a higher price for it. So this is one of the best things that could actually take place. Now, question 4 on the ballot, legalizing it in the state of Maryland And the impact that it will have on the African American community also works on the business side. If this passes, a minority business people who applied for licenses and were shut out of the market because they didn't get them, and that's a big zero when it comes to certain areas, depending on whether it's growing, processing, or whether it was actually dispensaries. Those individuals now are going to have a second opportunity to participate. That's the beauty of this. But it will only be a positive if your leadership in the state of Maryland,
Mm-hmm.
if the leadership is strong enough to dictate that the large major firms that are entering into this particular market, because they are going to have to put the process in which you apply in place, they're going to have to go back and correct those discriminatory practices that were used against us to keep us out. If they don't do that, then there is just going to be another round of ineffectiveness because African Americans lost between up to from 750,000 as high as $750,000 as low as 100,000 on those prior submissions without getting anything out of it.
Exactly.
So what this means is we get another shot. Now, whether those entities have the necessary cash to come back and participate, I don't know. But it opens that door, it reopens that door, and it puts it on the table for discussion. One of our stronger individuals who's going to be on the point on this is Delegate C.T. Wilson, who's already requested a meeting of all of the cannabis owners, the serious owners, to sit down with him within the next 2 weeks because they are start putting the legislation. He wants the input from those individuals who applied. So we're putting that together for individuals who may be listening. We're putting that together, and you can contact us about participating in that particular meeting, because if you don't give them the feedback, if you're not a person who's a part, if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. That's the bottom line. You've got to be at the table so you benefit, and we can no longer let these dollars just flow through our community and not to get our equal share.
You know, it's unfortunate that the first 15 licenses that were awarded, those individuals insisted that they have 10 years to cultivate the market, to basically corner the market, and they got it. So the 10 years has passed. The additional licenses that came afterwards that was added, part of that was awarded to outside companies like Budweiser. So we have to ensure that our legislators would question for once, or if it passed, more than likely, it's 80%, 90, to me, a 95% chance of passing. We have to ensure that our legislators protect those that have applied, that are African American in particular, but that we have the opportunity to not help those that already have licenses become mega entities, and we still fight to get at the table. If they're in the market, fine. These additional recreational licenses or new licenses, we should have first dibs at that. And not only should we have first dibs at it, but along with that, language that include those that have been that has done time, those reentry individuals, they should be able to apply as well. You know, it is not a fair game. I heard one of the major owners say, just anybody can't play. You can lock us up, but we can't play. And who is just anybody? And
Okay.
that's Cheryl Glenn.
Ooh. Oh my. Okay, so I have a question. So, Mr. Gaskins, you said a joint, but most people are smoking blunts. What's the difference?
That's a question you have to have Bruce here. Ask Bruce. He has more experience.
Hey, Bruce,
At it.
lower your camera or something. I feel like I'm looking at a miss. Yeah, there you go, Mr. Bubblehead or something. Unless he privately smoking a blunt.
Well, Quandra, Quandra, right? It's just it's terminology. Yeah, during my time, it was a joint. Okay.
Mm.
Over the years, during my children's time, now, which is now, it's a blunt. And but in some cases, it's not really a blunt
Are
because
you
it's the
muted, Bruce?
it's the size. It's
He
the
Can't hear
can't talk.
size.
you.
Take those, they usually brown, and they take the tobacco out and they put the marijuana in there. Others, in Joe's day, they would have zips and the little white papers, and then they
Oh, the
would
top
roll.
paper. The top paper.
Yeah,
Huh?
The
top.
top paper. The
Yeah,
little cap
top.
in the yellow. Yeah, top
Yeah,
paper.
yeah. Now, that's what I heard. But that would appear to be the major difference.
See, that's what they did at Maryland. Had he attended a HBCU, he would understand the plight of leaving a joint in your ashtray. However, if you get caught with a drink in the car, open bottle of alcohol,
Open
you're
container. Yeah.
it's a crime. So I'm saying that we can be not just creative, but intelligent enough to look at this is a drug, and it does put you in a euphoric state of mind. So there should be regulations that if you smoke in the privacy of your home, like you drink in the privacy of your home. So certain guidelines and things, we need to be really sensible and protect the citizens that don't smoke or put other lives at danger. So we really need to look at, there are precedents that have already been established by alcohol that we can literally use as a model to help shape marijuana.
And there's a generational disconnect as well.
Mm-hmm.
Older people would tend to look down on people who smoke marijuana, and whereas younger people, it's their way of life almost. And
Well,
and because of spiritual conditioning and a lot of other things, a lot of people have always been taught that marijuana was a drug and it was bad, and and so there must be some kind of education program, and that's why I think having it as a medical product first, although it wasn't the intent, could have some positive impacts because now a lot of older people, and I think Lisa must have said it last week, something about a lot of the folks, they're replacing opioids.
yes,
Yes, instead of the morphine with cancer patients and people who very
Exactly.
who are the later stages of life, or just people who have Alzheimer's and 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 the sorts. So I believe that we've even heard of some instances where marijuana has cured people of cancer. I don't know if it's true or not, but I've heard of.
So what I can tell you is this: working doing manipulations for cancer patients and terminally ill. Uh, Hospitals have the best marijuana. We have liquid, we have all kinds. So medical marijuana has been around. It's just that it's never been on the streets. So you can get all types. You can get it in pill form. You can get it. So
yes.
cancer, yeah. So it relaxes them. It gives them an appetite. So yes. So
And speaking of such, behind you, I just noticed. I say she outside. Are those marijuana plants behind you?
You know
yes.
the big green is big. Look at the little buds.
I just saw the buzz. I just saw the
But
buzz.
I'm gonna tell you, marijuana has entered the U.S. in 1930, and doctors were using it and educating the public on the benefits of it. Everything
Mhm.
from medicinal to clothing. There's many different benefits that we're looking at. So now, when individuals that I talk to that are in an older generation, that are cancer patients, Alzheimer's, depression,
Mhm.
there's a variety of different ailments that this drug could actually help. And the intro to that is they're in so much pain and they've gone through so much with opioids that they are more willing to try it, but the conversation takes place in private. They want to be educated and they don't want someone that's a millennial per se, and speaking of pastors, people that are more spiritually inclined, to really give them that insight. They receive it more so from myself or individuals that they think are not just smoking recreational. They're more receptive to learning more, and we have to get past that thinking that it's a gateway drug, as I've heard others say. That's, that was the intent, to keep you afraid, fearful, and to keep this drug out of the market as being a competitor for opioids. You make more money. So that was the issue in 1930, and it still is to this day. The fight to keep what makes more money or in the marketplace than not. So if we can begin to, we should have done it 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when it first entered the marketplace, done a better job at educating the medicinal benefits of it. And here we are now with recreation. Say it goes DC, so goes Maryland. We've got to do a better job so that individuals could see, you're locking us up for it, but there's a broader benefit all around that we should be having a conversation about.
Okay. The next question is, major cannabis corporations are attacking social and racial based programs nationwide. What impacts are expected if they are successful?
They're attacking it primarily. You had the Vice President of the United States and Cory Booker that partnered with I think his name is Mighty Mike. I may be saying it wrong, and God forgive me, because he's a bad brother that's in Atlanta. Him and T.I. and a couple of other rappers are there. They're doing a phenomenal job in assessing blacks in marijuana across the country. The mad dash for major corporations to keep us out is because you're dividing the marketplace and market share. And
Mhm.
literally, when you're impacting pockets, of course, there will be a campaign to how do you close that gap, or just keep a basic lockout. Most industries have that, and marijuana is no different. But what we've got to do, because we've been the most impacted negatively, is to do a better job at talking in small circles, large circles, wherever possible, using individuals like the Vice President and Cory Booker to continue to push the benefits of being in the marketplace and removing those barriers that are currently preventing us from being there.
Also,
Okay.
I'll comment on that a bit. What's happening on a major level is that the guys with the money, the big guys in the industry, are seeing that the state has provided a safe haven for programs to use such things as residency requirement, social, um, social programs that allow individuals at a certain level or a certain class, or who have a lack of income, who have been incarcerated, to participate in the process. They are also seeing that residency requirement for them gives them a unfair advantage if they are a national firm stepping into a market, because they don't live in that particular state. So they're going back to an old commerce law that was on the shelf that was never used before. And they are starting to apply that and saying that you're denying them the capacity to do business. Okay. And when you do that, it hasn't been used in a long time, very, very long time. I'm not too sure it's even been used in a while. But what it does then do is change the way you can write your laws in your state. So if the
Mhm.
state decides that it wanted to do a residency requirement to make sure that their taxpayers in that particular state could participate and protect them because they are not as large as a larger firm, it could rule that law unconstitutional. And what we got to be concerned about is they're going to spend a lot of money on it, a tremendous amount of dollars, because if they can somehow do that, then it'll be almost impossible for a small minority firm, or much less an individual who has been discriminated, locked up, and have those fines to participate. They won't be able to participate because these guys are going to come in and eat that particular market up. They've
Yes.
already done. They've challenged it in Maine, and
Mm.
they ruled that the state's Maine's program that they put in place was unconstitutional, and so that they could not do a residency requirement on it. And they could not uh, insist that they have African American goals on it,
Mhm.
and they will spend a lot more money. And with the attitude that we see prevailing throughout the U.S., they're going to move more. Now, the question that you have to ask yourself is that if it's not legal, and it is not on a federal level, how can a federal court rule that is unconstitutional at a state level? You see what I'm saying? So there's a serious economy with this. It's like, okay, you don't want to legalize it, but you want to control it. And
Yes.
the rationale for this is that the states moved ahead of the federal government. But when they moved ahead too fast, the big boys said, oh no, we're being locked out of the market. We're not going to be locked out of the market because we're going to put our money up and we're going to elect people who are going to insist and they're going to vote to ensure that this does not happen. And you watch the movement that the senators are doing now and the
Yes.
congressmen are doing now. And those individuals are being put a lot of money behind that. At the end of the day, those regulations on cannabis are going to be big, and they're going to be done to assure that that particular market continues to keep African Americans, people who were discriminated against, people who were locked and incarcerated from participating. Period. And all you will be is a user again. Now, how do we work and change that? I mean, you have to have uh, the control at a federal level. If you don't have the control at the federal level, the state program is going to be challenged by a federal court. They're going to enter and they're going to do it anyway. So we have to be very, very uh, um, involved in this particular election in November.
Yes.
It goes without saying, if we don't get and maintain the control of a friendly Congress, a friendly Senate, then
Mm.
African Americans are going to be out of this game totally. You will not be able to participate in any gains that you've made can be challenged, and and your business can be ruled unconstitutional. And it's a
Mm.
possibility that any license that you might have can be taken away from you. So we have a lot of things that every day that we wake up and we think we're making a step in the right direction, there is a trap that's 1 mile down the highway that'll pull you over and says you thought you got away. You didn't. And so we got to be very, very careful. We got to be diligent. It's no joke.
Mm-mm.
This is generational wealth that will keep you in poverty forever. So we have to be really intense on this, and that's what we're committed to doing from the African American Cannabis Association is being on top of this and putting pressure on those who are on the state level, because at this particular point in time, you cannot enforce them. You cannot enforce anybody to do anything for you if your elected leadership are controlled by other individuals besides your community. They get bought out and they go with to the highest bidder. And we've seen that numerous times in our system, and especially in cannabis. And you get individuals get paid to work against you. So, it becomes more challenging, Quandra, dealing with this particular issue and spending the time on it. So let's get some help. Let's make sure that elected politicians that we put in place are the people that can serve us. Let's make sure people like Westmore are elected to governorship. Let's make sure that our senators that have a chance of winning are there. in position. Let's make sure that we keep people out of office, like Bruce's friend down in Georgia. Uh,
You
yeah,
know, I don't
but
think it's any coincidence that on the ballot with question 4 is also a move to make Maryland Supreme Court to change the court. So we lose in the courts, and we've got to pay attention to what happens in the courts, along with pushing at the federal level. Individuals that's asking for our votes at the federal level need to understand this is where we are, and this is what we need your support on to legalize it at the federal level.
In 1979, just addressing Joe just for a second, sidebar. Herschel Walker was in high school,
Ah,
and,
ah.
and I covered his signing with the University of Georgia and got a police escort. And from that day on, he's not a friend, but he is an honorary white person in a town called Wrightsville, Georgia. Having said that, Georgia, like so many Republican-based states, they stand behind this thing which they call states' rights. So maybe the political strategy for us is in those states, if we do come out on the wrong side of this election, in those states that claim so much to be about states' rights, that the federal impetus to legalize marijuana will be left up to the states and not to the federal government. Because we do have a court, a very conservative court now, and that is the only way. Because some people flat out believe that marijuana, the older generation, those are the men that lead our country. They're usually 50 and over. They believe that they fundamentally in their heart believe that marijuana is something bad.
Well, that's where education, they also felt that way about alcohol, but they was drinking in their cars and in the privacy of their home. Education is everything, and awareness is everything. And I don't believe that enough of us over 50 are actually talking about it from a beneficial perspective instead of a recreational, and just seeing it as, okay, let me get high and get the munchies and laugh a lot.
Is that what happens, Lisa?
Of course, that's one of the benefits. Hey, I'm telling you, I was affected by the opioids that was prescribed to me that literally almost took my life and put me out of business. So when I look at the benefits of marijuana, I look at it as rescuing me. But I've also been impacted negatively because in that same year of my car accident, I stayed in a hotel in Prince George's County because I was too tired to drive home and taking my sister home, and got up late to go to a meeting in Baltimore. And Joe was waiting on me, and he's calling, and I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm rushing." The hotel manager was rushing me out. You should have asked for a late wake up. Like, how do you oversleep and ask for a late wake up? Was beyond me. So I kirked out, and I did a sister girl, rolled ahead, and I cursed that man so bad that I really asked God for forgiveness to this day. However, a cop was sitting next to him and heard me. And as I left that hotel, that cop followed me and pulled me over as soon as I pulled off the lot and harassed me, asked me immediately, did I have any drugs in the car? And I'm looking at him like, you're crazy. I'm like, okay, I understand that you may have been there in the room when I cursed this guy out, and allow me to apologize. I was rushing. I was upset. It's no excuse. Let me apologize. But no, he says, oh, no, 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 no. Get out the car. And I'm like, are you serious? He says, get out the car. He handcuffed me, made me sit on the curb. I had Joe on the line, and I said, Joe, call the lawyer. This is getting ready to go bad. I don't know where this guy is going with this, but it's going bad. He made me get out the car. He ransacked my car. And I'm like, what are you looking for? At that time, I had zero exposure or encounters with marijuana at all. He said he found crack cocaine and marijuana in my car and locked me up, handcuffed me, arrested me, locked me up. Joe videotaped everything. And I'm like, are you serious? I called my attorney. He says, get to a lab and get tested to prove that you have zero drugs in your system. I did that. You know what? I still had to go 6 months to a class and pee for 6 months because this guy who literally out of a bad incident at a hotel planted marijuana and drugs in my car, and it, no evidence that I had it whatsoever. I'm shocked. The crack cocaine got thrown out because it couldn't be field tested. But this is my experience with a white cop and marijuana, and yet I can't enter the daggone industry for barriers of big money, big corporations paying legislators that keeping people like me out. So yeah, I'm going to continue to work hard, advocate, and lobby because this is totally unfair. It's not fair at all. It's not
So,
for me.
so you mentioned that Budweiser and other corporations are buying up and getting into a market, the cannabis market. So aren't they regulated by the federal government?
They're
Why is it?
regulated for alcohol. They're regulated entering. You have two separate different industries with requirements for marijuana that's still being shaped. That's still
Mhm,
marijuana is still, even though it's been around forever, is still a new industry. And
mhm,
shaping this industry is what's happening right now. So being at the forefront and getting in on the front end now is critical to us as business owners. That's and the big 15 that initially won those licenses knew that, and they worked very hard to make sure that they were able to get a footing in the market, understand the industry, and make sure that we're out of it, that we remain locked out of it. Like alcohol, you don't see a lot of major liquors that are made and produced by black people. You now have the Jay-Z's of the world and Kanye West and individuals that are getting to making alcohol beverages, but that was owned and cornered and solely a white person's market for centuries.
okay.
Some of the some of the other impediments that we're dealing with are on display now. So what we are thinking, okay, since this drug is a illegal drug, was operating in each state, the federal government has said, okay, it's illegal, but we're still going to collect taxes
Hmm.
from you. So they are collecting taxes, state and federal taxes from your product, which you find very, very surprising that since it's illegal, what gives you the right to do this? But it's IRS. But now what's happening with this is that IRS has already started, and this is the study so far. They've determined that cannabis owners, the cases of them being audited, is twice the case of a normal business. So in other words, with your business, even if you're lucky enough to get into the business, you know that you're going to have the hardship of dealing with the IRS on your back the
Hmm.
entire time. So now, because you're a large corporation, becomes a little bit more easier for you to deal with that because you can have very good tax attorneys, as our former president did. And by having a good tax attorney, you're able to navigate yourself through a system. But for smaller entities, they're going to be unfairly burdened with the cost of having very expensive uh, accountants
Hmm.
who they're going to have to pay to keep them in business. because they're going to be there to put you out of business. The second thing that you got in the industry that's already prevailing is that your financial sources in which you're dealing with. I think on the last year I mentioned that the banks that you're that's holding your funds taking a risk holding your funds because at any particular point in time, the federal government can come in and seize those particular assets and they can find and take the chart away from those banks at any time. But this is what I know that during um, the last application process that I had experience was with money put in a bank account at Capital One. And at Capital One, they closed down three accounts. One account was a holding account for to be in for funds that were to be invested in cannabis. The other two accounts were just regular operating accounts, and one was a personal account. The other was an operating account for a business account. But they closed down without telling saying anything, without contacting you, without doing anything. They came in and closed those accounts. You were doing business that day, and the next day you were out of business, and you had to wait until they saw it convenient enough in a statement to send a statement out to you and ask you to call their attorneys about your account and why they close you down. And that's with telling the bank what you were doing with your money in the bank. So that became a very difficult. There's going to be an impediment that's going to be there for the smaller firms. The larger firms still have access and have created the relationships with the banks that are willing to take that risk. So the African American Cannabis Association has made it a point that they reached out to other individuals. So if you come to us and you're looking to have a banking relationship, we can set you up with a bank that will do that. We avoided that because we went to a state chartered bank and used the state chartered bank instead of a federal bank. So again, people not knowing the industry and wanting to get into the industry will have to overcome those impediments. So even though the president has said he's going to move the barriers, it doesn't mean that's going to happen tomorrow morning. And it doesn't mean that those barriers are going to be immediately moved until it becomes legal on a federal level, which then authorizes the federal government to handle and hold your money for you, manage your money, or allow you to deposit their money into your bank accounts. Because right now, you can't legally go and deposit your money in the ATM that has FDIC on it. You can't use MasterCard. You can't use Visa. You can't use any of those cards to do your transaction. You have to use a card that you will have to have created for you so that you can access those particular funds. And like, quite frankly, the ones like you would use at a Wawa's, or as you see other individuals have created their own cards that you put your funds in, you hold them. What are those other ones, Bruce, that you can actually use?
Netspin,
Uh, uh, the that you can actually request.
Netspin,
Who?
like Netspin.
Yes, those kind of accounts that are not traditional accounts that you would use to send your money through, but it's not the federal government. So essentially, you're avoiding the regular banking system in order to do business. But they charge you. You're being impacted by that because you're paying fees that are a lot more expensive than you would have for a regular banking account.
And the
So we
banks, go ahead.
No, we still have. All I was going to close and say with that we really have a lot of work to do in a very short period of time, and our elected officials who are not as knowledgeable as we are, and we're not experts by any means of the imagination. There are individuals who've been in this business for a very, very long time. When I said since it was introduced into the U.S., that have already gained the time and the experience doing this, and they have done it in a sheltered market that have allowed them to operate and keep other individuals out, which is totally unfair when they set that up. But if we decided to sue them, it would take us forever to obtain damages for the state giving them the authority to be able to set up their businesses and lock everybody else out.
What I was going to add to that, in addition to the banks, is your if individuals that purchase recreation or medicinal have marijuana in their system, they very well could be limited or preventing them from getting medical treatments because doctors are guided by federal guidelines, and particularly low income individuals that have Medicaid, Medicare, fixed incomes, their treatments are reliant on federal fundings, and doctors would not prescribe painkillers or certain prescriptions if they have marijuana in their system. So we have to drill down and understand the impact across the board, from banks to our healthcare to basically business ownership and being in the industry as a whole.
Okay, so what can the average voter or constituent do to be involved?
To be involved or to make a change? Which one?
We can't hear you, Mr. Branch.
I don't know why.
Did you call him Mr. Grinch?
I said Mr. Branch. Branch.
No, I heard you. I heard you correctly. The Grinch just fit so perfectly. I couldn't leave it off the table, Bruce. I saw it.
I couldn't hear him. I said, can't hear you, Mr. Branch. So I'm not in this. Mr. Branch.
Turn your volume up.
He has it mute. He has himself on.
Take the mute off, Bruce.
Yeah.
It's off now. I don't know why I can't hear it.
I can hear you now, but not as loud as everybody else.
Okay, maybe I need to somewhere the volume is on this.
No, you good. Now you good. Come up closer to the mic.
All right. Lisa made me forget. Maybe I've been smoking some of her supply.
That's that black and gold. That black and gold.
But I wanted to go back before what Joseph says. There's another issue into you talking about major corporations, Fortune 500.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it. To me, I think about it in this way. Tobacco has been so much frowned upon that smokers are no longer smokers. The major market for them to create to make up the deficit is through marijuana. Companies in Kentucky like Brown Forman, the major who make Cool, the major cigarette companies, they have cleared off land because this is something that they want to change the crop from tobacco to cannabis. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a very, very strong consideration. What we have to do is get people to the polls. I think that's one issue, educating them and allow them to know how this is going to benefit the entire community. The second thing is we have to keep the pressure on our legislators, whoever they may be, to allow an equitable share of the cannabis market for minorities. Well, I'm not going to say minorities, for African-American business owners.
Thank you.
Because we have been the ones who have been egregiously impacted by the laws in the past.
Okay, so let's say, were you finished?
Yes.
Okay,
that was Joe.
That was Joe. Okay, well, what I wanted to know is this. Like you said, young people are smoking more marijuana than most adults. I think it's a kind of an even kind of thing, because I have friends that do have done for more than 30 years. Um, I have
Sure.
relatives who, live by it. The difference is this: the one thing that concerns me is a lot of the marijuana that is sold doesn't smell like the marijuana that my friends smoke. So what's the difference?
The difference is you have different strands, and marijuana and the growth of it has come a long way since Sesame and Columbia Gold and those of the OG is what they call it, and
Mhm.
they've developed a lot of development has started or initiated in Amsterdam's and other areas of the world has now taken place in our marketplace to give consumers a variety. If you have depression, you don't want to smoke indica, something that's going to make you depressed. You want to go with a
Oh,
sativa,
okay.
something that gives you energy. So there's difference in the growth and the different strands. So it's going to bring a different smell, a different quality to the marketplace. And the younger folks, on what they say is, I got that gas. I don't know about the gas, but I'd rather have something that's regulated that I know I can go into a dispensary and understand that this particular pill is a hybrid, and for my moccasins, that this is going to help me to get an appetite.
Could
So
you show us some of the different strands, Lisa?
I knew he was coming at that one. So the question,
I can, but then I have to kill you, Bruce.
so the thing is this. So a lot of the stuff that's sold on the streets smells terrible. I mean, it just smells
Reggie.
horrible. I
They
mean,
call that Reggie.
you call that what?
They call that Reggie.
Regular marijuana. Bruce is using the acronym or the ebonics term of Reggie.
Reggie. Okay.
It's,
So
it's
the worst to
the regular
smell is called
marijuana.
Reggie. And the stuff that smells very nice, that's what called
Loud.
loud. Okay. Okay. So I'm learning something here. So okay, so how
No,
can
I had to, Lisa taught me all of this. Lisa and Joe. I was very unaware of this.
Well, you're not accurate. The Reggie is not necessarily on how it smells. It depends on the type of strand, the type of marijuana that gives off different odors and different
okay.
smells. So
Okay.
it doesn't have to be a regular or not a specialty loud. And you're so old. You're why individuals say no, we don't want this in the marketplace. I'm just kidding. But there is an education process. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, really a broad education, and there's still a large market for underground. I mean, everyone can't enter the marketplace. Individuals that's been selling marijuana for years and don't qualify and don't want to go through the politics of it. And there's then a certain market that don't want to go into a dispensary and go through the process of paying $50 to a doctor and 200 and something on top of the $50 just to get a card so that you can then go into the dispensary to buy it.
But when it's regulated,
Required. It's not required for you to do so in a liquor store when you're talking about recreation. So, individuals don't want to be under that scope and gun. So they still will buy it on the black market. So the black market is still alive and well. I don't know how much impact that legalization has had on the black market, but none, it's more expensive to buy at a dispensary than it is to buy on the black market.
Okay. All right. Any last words?
smoke, smoke, and keep on smoking.
Okay. Smoke, smoke, and keep on smoking.
let,
Um,
let me see. I want to reaffirm what I said before. In order, it doesn't matter whether it's cannabis or whether it's bills that make sense for you as an individual. Period. It doesn't matter. But the most important thing that matters to you in your decision making process is remembering that November the 8th and during early voting season session, you've got to get out the polls to assure that you're represented with the quality of people that you need to be represented by. it's not easy, and it's a very difficult thing to do with some individuals because they're not politically acclimated. But at this particular point in time, they're going to have to do it real quick because every vote counts in this election cycle. November the 8th, you got to show up. And I want to make sure that every time I have an opportunity to reach out to people, I just remind them this is no joke, people. We know what happened with Donald Trump when Donald Trump tried to take over the U.S. and turn it into his country, in which he was going to eliminate all terms for the president and also to impose on you his will. And he's still
Exactly.
doing it now with his senators, U.S. senators across the board, everybody,
And the
inclusive
courts.
and the courts and courts. So now we have to wake up, and it's no joke. We have to be serious. Marijuana is just one small portion of this, but across the board, we have to select quality individuals, um, and especially in the state of Maryland, which we reside.
I
Well,
would
no, okay.
I would say, have the conversation with those that are not politically connected. Your kitchen table, your barbecues, from now into election. We saw Ben Jealous, Anthony Brown get elected past the primaries, but literally failed to win the governorship during the general election. So this is critical because we have more than just marijuana on the ballot. We have the courts, which we've seen our women's rights be stripped by the courts. So it is so important that we pay attention and have the conversation, instead of just saying, oh well, we'll wait, or we trust this representative. Just go a little further, a few steps further. This is really an important critical time in our life, in our history, to not have a Donald Trump representative at the state of Maryland, just outside of DC, that's representing, which we know would not represent all of Maryland. At least Westmore will represent all of Maryland. Every person will have a voice at the table. Marijuana is has greater benefits, so we need to not just look at recreation, but refining what the medical restrictions are, and the allowables and disallowables, and shaping the legislation that will help to control and have entry for us at the table, as well as our courts. So I just encourage us to pay attention, to have those conversations beyond the four of us, beyond our kitchen table, each one teach one, connect to someone that literally is not technically engaged or involved, and have them to take someone to the poll and vote, or vote early. Have a mail-in ballot party.
Very good. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to say is there are some examples that if you don't vote, this will happen. When you didn't vote, if you didn't vote in the last election with Trump in it, you voted for Trump. This time, if you put in a Trump supported um, candidate, and you need to research. I mean, you need to do your homework. You need to have those conversations at that backyard cookout, or the kids, like she said, kitchen conversations at that church service or after service while you're breaking bread. These are the things that are important because right now, just think when Trump was in office and then when he lost, he had a rally of people that came out of nowhere, and they attacked the Capitol, and they ran around DC like cannibals and human
And
hyenas.
Cox was one of them.
So what I'm saying is, you need to do your research. It's very important. Yes, Maryland would be making history. That's important to me, but at the same time, if you don't get up and vote, you cannot complain who wins, because if the wrong person gets in office, you voted for him by not participating. So one of the things we're going to be doing all the way up to November the 8th is educating, giving you resources, letting you know where the polls are, One of the participations of us not voting is because we have Armstead Jones still in office, still in an appointed position, and yet he's still here. He's still
Right.
here because we keep keeping him here. So this is the time to express your voices, voice your opinions, and let the future, hopefully, the future governor of Maryland, Westmore, know that we need number one is him out. Number two, and some other delegates. You're going to be served every week of what you're not doing. If you're shady on your legislation, we're going to be announcing you every week. On that note, I'll say good night. Thank you, Mr. Branch. Thank you, Ms. Ellis. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Gaskins, for joining. See you next week for Political Cipher with Q.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.
Good night.
Good night.